We'll get started. We're a little bit late. I promise we won't go past 7 o'clock. I want to keep this short and sweet. Just a little bit of a reminder here. Obviously, there's a backlog there, and if you didn't get a chance to grab forms or pay fees, certainly we can do that after the fact and get some of that taken care of. This is an outstanding turnout, and it looks like we may run short on some of the team booklets, but that's all right. There'll be more available as we get closer to the season, so don't panic if you don't happen to get one of those. There is concussion testing going on across the hallway. There seemed to be a little bit of confusion about whether or not middle school students had to take the concussion test. They don't have to take it, but we suggest that they do. Now, the trainer tells us that the younger kids are, the less likely they are to get an accurate baseline reading with a concussion test. So it doesn't do a whole lot of good the younger they are. So if your students are in 7th and 8th grade, and certainly they're free, so it doesn't cost you anything. They just sit there and respond to some computer questions and things, and then that gives us a baseline to test whether or not they've actually got a concussion. The trainer does that by asking questions and doing some tests right there on the field or on the court, wherever they happen to be. So it doesn't hurt to have them take the concussion test, but they don't have to if they don't want to. Don't forget that there is a sign-in sheet in the back at the end of the table. We want to know if your sons, daughters are here tonight participating in this activity, even though they may be over here and not in here right now. We want to give them credit for being here. So make sure that you sign them in at the back table. That's back there as well. We're going to take just a few minutes here to outline some things in our handbook. So if you have a copy of the handbook, that was the first document on the table back there. You can look through it as I mention a couple of things. I'm going to go right to the back of that document first. It used to be that we had to have a form filled out for each and every athlete. So if mom and dad had 2 or 3 children, they would have to fill out 2 or 3 forms, and it was a lot of repetition. Well, we changed that last year so that you can now register a family on the same form, and it's kind of the write-it-once principle. But the code booklet needs to be filled out each year. So make sure you do that and have a current copy. All of these forms and fees can be paid after tonight as well. You don't have to turn it in tonight. You don't have to pay tonight. The school office is open until 4 o'clock every day until school starts, but we would advise that you get things taken care of before the season starts. Football happens to start Monday, so you don't have a whole lot of time to get those in, but they can bring them in on the first day. First day is equipment, and then the second day is actually a practice day. We will have concussion testing on Monday as well, because we know that things come up and not everybody's able to get here and do all of that, and besides there's quite a few kids in there today. So that is going to be available that day, and also the first day of volleyball season, which is 2 weeks later, also on Monday. Any questions on any of that so far? Okay, let's take a look at the code booklet starting on page 1. Now there were a couple of changes from last year to this year, but they're not very significant. One of the changes was going from middle school to high school. It used to be that we took the 8th grade students' grades and made them sit as freshmen, but we took that out so that all freshmen, all students coming in from the middle school will get a fresh start academically, so they don't have any penalties to worry about as it comes to grades. They get a fresh start there. But obviously, grades are a point of emphasis. Nothing pains me more than to have to tell an athlete that they can't play because their grades aren't what they should be. That's not our objective. Our objective here is to certainly make kids eligible. But obviously that's a two-way street. The student athlete needs to be aware of what's going on in all their classes and get their homework done and get it in a timely manner so that they get credit for it. So I would remind all students, we got a fresh start to the school year. Hit the books hard so that there aren't any issues when it comes to grades. Now we do check periodically, and there is a schedule in this, and you can kind of see where that's at. But there's a midterm check, and then of course there's a quarter check. Those are the big ones. We do check prior to those and warn coaches that somebody might be in trouble so that they can then talk with the student athlete, go to see your teacher, looks like you're having trouble here, see what you can do about it, so they're able to do that. Our school also offers tutoring, which is really a good thing for those people who need some extra help. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong in needing extra help in certain areas. Don't be afraid to go in and ask a teacher. Even before it's too late, they'll certainly work with you. I know the faculty and they'll do that. So that kind of covers the academic part of this. Also, remember that participating in athletics is a privilege. You've heard that year after year. I think I say it every year. It's not a right. And we want you to represent our school in the best way possible. And so that means that maybe we don't always like the rules and regulations, but we have to follow them. We're governed by them. And of course, up above our rules and regulations would be the WIAA rules and regulations, because we're bound to follow those because we are a member of the WIAA. And so our sports are sanctioned by that. So make sure that you take the time, and I know it can be a pain, but take the time to sit down, moms, dads, and athletes, and go through this together. Talk it over a little bit. If you have questions, certainly ask. Call somebody and try to get an answer to the question. But it really helps to know what's being expected of you before it actually happens, so that's not too late at some point. Obviously, we all have responsibilities in this. We're all in it together. We all have a stake in the athletic programs. The parents do, the athletes do, the coaches do, everybody does. And we want to make this as good of an experience as we can make it for all athletes. And we want everybody to be successful, and we want to have fun doing that. But we need to work together to make that happen. If you look at pages 2 and 3, if you're following along a little bit, toward the top of page 2, letter C, a little brief discussion about attendance. You're required to be in school, but we know that sometimes there are appointments and things like that. Obviously, those are the kinds of things that are excused. You're allowed to do that. And so, if you have appointments, make sure that you let the office know so that they can inform us, and especially the coaches, that perhaps you might not be there or whatever the case may be. But be sure that you are in school. Again, you don't want to have to sit because you weren't in attendance. One of the things that's happened kind of every year we go through this, we have sometimes a little difficulty with uniforms. Now, these are property of the school district, and as taxpayers, you are aware painfully how much it costs to run a school. And obviously, we're not wanting to buy uniforms every year. We do have a rotation for that. But my point in all of this is, if an athlete is issued a uniform, we need to get that back and get it back quickly. Coaches are supposed to arrange to have a turn-in day, a system for doing that. Sometimes they don't get quite turned in and we have to chase a little bit, but we should get those in a timely manner. Otherwise, we have to charge a fee. Alyssa, did you have something?
Does anybody else need to take an impact test?
She's our trainer. That's Alyssa, our trainer.
Everyone good? No one else is going to take it? All right.
Are we good? Alyssa, don't run away.
Well, there's a bunch of people.
There's still people, okay.
I just want to make sure, because there's smoke and computers.
Okay. So anyway, back to the uniform thing, just make sure that your student athletes turn those in and kind of listen for that turn-in day and whatever they do, you know, make sure you get those in. If you're injured, the student athlete, this is to you, make sure you tell someone. We have forms that we have to fill out and document the injuries, so make sure you notify somebody. And I'll just say this, that in today's age of concussions, you need to be careful. They're not something that you want to mess with. And they're really, you know, more important than we realize now. And you know that because of all of the emphasis placed on those. So we want to make sure that nobody is suffering from a concussion and that you're able to participate. There is some protocol that we have to follow once that C word comes out. So, you know, we have to be very careful as to how we approach those kinds of things. And most of the time, injuries might be nagging, you know, a sprained finger or something like that. But if it's worthy of a doctor's visit, then we have to have a doctor's permission to let you participate again. So be aware of that. I'm not telling you not to go to the doctor. I'm just saying that we have to have that. That's part of the protocol for that. You may have noticed as you came through that there are individual handbooks back there only for the fall sports. There will be others for the winter and spring sports as they come into season. But also be aware that your athletes are then subject to those as well. Those are things that the coaches see as important in the successful operation of their squad. So they kind of get added into the mix when it comes to rules and regulations. We have plenty of those for sure. You are all also aware of the rules of conduct. Starting on page 3 is where the conduct part of this is addressed. And there are rules there. We have major violations and minor violations, and each of those carries with it certain punishments. And once again, we hope that we don't have to deal with that. Carlene?
Did everybody get one of those those handbooks?
Anybody need one of those?
I grabbed a few more that were in the office. I just wanna make sure
Somebody
we can
short?
follow
Anybody
along.
need one?
I'm telling Amber, yeah,
Yep.
she's got one.
Couple over here. But I think the standards of conduct that are outlined here are pretty self-explanatory because it does identify the offense, and then a little farther along it would do the consequence for those things. And we keep a spreadsheet of what violations have occurred and so on. So you can kind of take a look at those as well. On page 5, letter K toward the bottom of the page, the transportation thing. This is one of the most difficult things that we have that are, it's really difficult sometimes because of the 2 communities involved, actually 3 during football, but the 2, and practices and shuttle buses and what we do during games. Sometimes people slip through the cracks, but on a daily basis, we provide a shuttle bus to and from Green Lake schools. Starts out here, picks up kids here, takes them to Green Lake if they need to go there. It will pick up Green Lake students and bring them back here if they need to come here. And then it returns them back at the end of the day. 6 o'clock is when that starts going back the other direction. And we encourage all students to ride the shuttle bus for practices. Now, there are some cases where if you plead your case to the administrator, actually principal, our administrator is both the administrator and principal, so you can plead to him or to the new principal over in Green Lake. They are able to, kind of exempt out of that and be able to drive to and from practices based on where they might live, or maybe they've got a certain work schedule that kind of requires them, they wouldn't make it if they went back and forth and then had to go to work after that type of thing. So you can try to get permission to ride in your own car, but the thing is you should not transport other students, but there's even a form for that. There's a form for everything. So it is possible, but what I would do is if you have concerns about that, discuss it in the office with the people there so that you make sure you're on the same page with that. But we would want you to ride the shuttle bus to and from practices. When we have a home game, and a home game is either in Princeton, Montello, or Green Lake, then we do not provide transportation for those games. So it's up to the parents to get them to those. We do provide transportation to all out-of-town games. And there will be departure times and so on. Coaches are usually aware of that, and they will notify their players and let them know when the bus leaves and so on. So make sure you kind of follow that. Again, that's just kind of a summary of that. On page 6, there is a lengthy section that starts there on due process. Now, we've talked about different rules and regulations here. And as you read this booklet, you're going to see what they are all about. If something should happen during the season that you're not particularly happy with, and there's a decision that was made that perhaps isn't what you thought it might be, there is a system here, it's the due process system, that you would follow. So I would call your attention to that. Sometimes when things happen, we're able to clarify with a quick discussion and investigation without getting too complex, because obviously we're human beings. I make mistakes, you do, and so we try to fix those. We try to make it right when we can. And so if you're able to, if something happens and you're not quite happy, you let us know and we talk through it and we try to get a resolution before it would even go to something like this. Because this system, this due process thing that everybody's entitled to, takes forever. And as you're going through that process, the season could be over before it's even resolved. So anyway, it's in there, but you can do with it as you please, read through it, take a look at it, and so on. On page 8, right toward the end of this thing, there's a warning of inherent risk that goes with sports. But right above that, I said this earlier in the presentation, that this is a right, a privilege, not a right. That everybody, we want to see everybody out, we want to have everybody participate. It would be great if everybody would do that. But we are governed by these rules and regulations. But right above that is a short paragraph, and it talks about common sense. And really, if you know right from wrong and you have a good common sense about you, I don't think you'll have any issues. I don't think there'll be any problems. You should have a smooth sports season, whatever it might be. I also want to point out the fact that on page 8, there is another section to this booklet, and that's about the parent extracurricular code as well. Every year, it's not any different from one year to the next, but occasionally I will get questioned about why isn't my son or daughter playing. I sympathize. I had a son who played basketball, and of course I thought he was the best basketball player in the world. But he wasn't a starter, and I went to many games and maybe watched him play minimally during the evening, but yet I understood the system. I was a coach myself, and I get that not everybody is a starter. I want to tell you here now that if you have questions concerning your son or daughter participating, that you should really take the time to talk to your coach. I'm not at practice, so I can't tell you why that individual is playing or isn't playing. I can't tell you that. I don't have an answer. There are some things that are best resolved by you talking with them. And granted, sometimes it doesn't work, and that's when you go to the next step. But my point in this is just communicate with your coaches. I also want to address just for a minute coaches. We don't have a lot of people lined up at our doors to coach any of these sports. It's not an easy task. I wish it was easy, and I wish that we would have a lot more people interested in doing that. We have openings right now for various coaches that we can't fill. We advertise, nobody wants to do this. We treat as coaches as we do athletes, that it's kind of a learning curve for them. Some of them have been in it longer than others, and they know better, but some of them haven't been. And so we try to work with those people and try to make them better. And so I hope that you look at it that way. And yes, they have to maintain a certain standard of conduct and so on, but understand what their job is too and what it entails. It's about 2 minutes before 7. I'm done. Do you have any questions? Okay, Carlene is still available. Coach Dunleavy, are you here? Yes? Did you want to meet with volleyball people up front here?
Yeah, let's go up front.
Volleyball people up front?